Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. If you regularly bike in Seattle, you probably know at least a few spots where the squeeze between cars and cycles gets real scary, especially streets that don't have protected bike lanes where you have to share the road with vehicles. In a minute, we'll talk with a University of Washington PhD student who's developed a handlebar sensor that can measure the most dangerous streets in Seattle. But first, let's get you caught up. King County Auditor's Office is looking for public input about what to investigate next. They've put together a website where the public can suggest which agencies should be audited. The Auditor's Office does independent oversight of public agencies in King County and also capital projects. You have until July 1st to suggest ideas. Seattle Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal will be at Seattle Central College this evening for a town hall. She'll give an update on what she's working on in Congress, but most of the event will be a live Q&A with constituents. The event starts at 5:30 at the Broadway Performance Hall, and you are required to RSVP. And another grocery store in Seattle is biting the dust. The Whole Foods on Capitol Hill is closing this Friday. The company says it's closing the store due to performance and lack of growth potential, and that employees will be transferred to other stores. The Capitol Hill location opened October 2018 on the ground floor of a high-rise apartment building. According to the Puget Sound Business Journal, the closure announcement came just a few days after the building was sold. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Seattle can be a dangerous place to ride your bike. On some roads, cars just get too close. And if you're new to cycling here, how do you know which routes are safest? A PhD graduate student at the University of Washington has developed a technology that's helping to map the region's riskiest bike routes. It's a handlebar sensor that measures if a car is coming within 4 feet of your bike, also known as a close pass. It was developed by a team led by Joe Breda in the UW's Computer Science Department. The data isn't public yet, but we wanted to know if it could be used by cities and the cycling community to prevent crashes. Hey, Joe Breda.
Hey,
Patricia Murphy, nice to meet you. I'm so glad you brought your bike.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
We recently met up with Joe at the corner of North 45th Street and Woodlawn Avenue in Wallingford, where his study found a lot of close passes. We started the conversation by talking about how he came up with this idea.
I guess the reason why I came up with this idea was because I care a lot about everyone who wants to being comfortable experiencing the benefits of, biking. There's a lot of good health benefits and also environmental benefits, but it seems like people were uncomfortable getting on the bike and taking that initial jump into it. And so we surveyed a bunch of people and found that across the board, even for people who are very experienced with biking, the primary factor preventing people from biking more than they currently do is actually just a fear of getting hit by a car. The next thing I thought was how can we provide information that in the absence of improving the actual environment and making it safer could inform ways for people to just pick safer routes and increase their comfort getting on the bike.
I'm glad you said that some people, even experienced riders, are uncomfortable riding, because I used to ride to work from the north end of Seattle, and I always felt fantastic when I got to work, but then I started to realize that it was more adrenaline that was flowing through me because of the close encounters I had on the way.
Totally.
And long story short, my bike got stolen, but the reality was that was an experience for me. I wanted to ride my bike, but it was sometimes kind of terrifying.
No, I totally agree. I think the more that I've biked, the more I've become aware of how dangerous it is, and I think that's common for a lot of people. But also I think that there's a lot of people who, are either told cycling is very dangerous, or, they maybe had a difficult experience the first time they biked, and so then they didn't really get into it, but they want to. I hear this story a lot.
And this is a helpful way to help them figure out how to be more comfortable, maybe.
Yeah, totally. I consider the primary motivation for this project lowering the barrier of entry for cyclists to get into the sport and the mode of transportation.
Show me your sensor, Joe.
Yeah, so basically it's just a pair of proximity sensors. They detect distance of passing objects. There's 2 of them, and so you can basically triangulate whether or not something is approaching from behind or the cyclist is passing something. And so that allows us to basically just count things that pass the cyclist and get the proximity itself because they are proximity sensors.
Can I see this?
Sure.
Oh, it's so light, and it slips right into the handlebar. It has a little peg on the end that slips into the handlebars, and I'm trying to picture you making 15 of these in your kitchen.
It's a lot of hot glue.
I do see the glue. The craft is strong, Joe. The craft is strong in this one, and it has a little C charger there.
Yep.
You gave this to a bunch of cyclists,
I did,
correct? Yeah. Okay, tell me how that worked.
I sent out an email through Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, which is like a local activist group, and I basically asked if people wanted to help participate in a research study to source a data set to study cyclist safety. And I got, I think, over 200 responses in the first day.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's clearly a desire for this kind of stuff and a great community to support it, and I was able to hand make 15 of these sensors, and so I could only pick 15 people but over the course of the next couple weeks, I basically just iteratively made these sensors and distributed them to people who met me outside the CS building every single day of the week until I had given them to 15 people.
How did you choose from those 200 people who you were going to choose?
So in my screening survey that I had everyone fill out, I asked people to sort of self-rank how experienced they were cycling, how often they do it, and how varied the routes were they did. Because I was looking to get both, obviously maximize the amount of time these sensors were collecting data, but also collect varied data across the city. I didn't want the map to be all up and down the Burke, but all over the city. And sure enough, I found 15 people who cover a lot of ground. So I think it was 1,000 miles traveled over 2 months. And definitely the map ends up covering a decent portion of the city.
What did you learn from that data?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing I learned is that this can be used as a collision circuit, which is sort of a term in the industry of urban planning and traffic, which just means a signal that itself is not a collision, but can be used statistically in the same way as a substitute for a collision when studying safety. So essentially, rather than relying on people getting hit by cars in order to source a data set and calculate statistics on safety across the road, we can actually just look at these leading indicators, which no one has to get hurt in the process, but is a close call or a close pass.
Okay, so now I think I need to ask you where in the city I should not be riding my bike. Where were the most dangerous intersections that you found in your study?
Yeah, so definitely I think one of the biggest hotspots was the intersection of Westlake Ave North and Mercer Street in SLU. So this makes sense. There's pretty fast-moving traffic. I think both streets sort of feed into highways, and as I recall, no bike infrastructure on those, at least on Mercer. I think Westlake, you can kind of hop on the Westlake bike trail, but if you're riding on the street like some people do, it can be quite dangerous.
Very kinetic environment.
Definitely. I think there were also a couple areas in Cap Hill, along East Olive Way, and also up in U District. There were a lot, not just on Roosevelt Way Northeast, but some of the other sort of north-south avenues like 11th Ave.
Do you think this technology could help improve safety for riders?
I definitely think so. I think that there's 2 avenues. One is sort of a top-down approach where we have this measure of cyclist safety that sort of kind of refreshes as people are riding and collecting more data. And this could be used to either allow urban planners or policymakers to figure out where there needs to be improvements, or also A/B test the improvements they do make, right? Because the data keeps getting collected. It's not like a survey that happens one time, but if they make a change to the road infrastructure by adding a protected bike lane or something, they can literally see in the signal that close passes go away. The other way it can improve safety, in the absence of these infrastructure changes, is bottom up by just routing cyclists on safer routes. In the end of my study, I interviewed participants and just asked them, what showed them the map and said, what does this tell you? And I had people confirm that, yes, I used to go on this route, now I go on this route. I definitely experience it being much safer. And, these participants knew about these routes ahead of time because they're experienced cyclists, but they, reckoned back to when they first discovered the safer route and said this would be useful for that.
Well, and I mean, defensive riding is a thing you need to do in the city, but ultimately safety for cyclists comes down to the behavior of drivers often, leaving enough space, being cognizant of their zone. Could this technology that you've built have an impact on drivers as well?
Yeah, totally. I think that a map like this can spread awareness, right? I even see an avenue in the future where something like this could be used by like insurance companies as
city planners
as ways to incentivize better driver behavior. Because again, like this doesn't just measure stuff about the road infrastructure, it measures driver behavior because, you know, you can have a road with perfect infrastructure, but if you have a community of drivers that are intentionally, you know, going out of their way to commit close passes, this sensor will pick that up.
Wow. Something interesting when I was watching the video that you put together for UW was the side-by-side of the collisions in the city and the data from your traffic sensor. Let's talk a little bit about what you found there.
What I wanted to do with that is I wanted to show that the presence of close passes in an area could be used as an indicator for the presence of historic collisions. And we were able to find a 60% correlation, which tells us that these locations where the close passes occurred are more likely to also be locations where people may have in the past or you know, could in the future be hit by a car. And actually, something even more interesting is we also sourced a data set of perceived safety, which is basically just asking people if a location seems safe to them, like if they would feel safe biking there. And we tried to compare that with both close passes and historic collisions as well, and found that close passes are actually a better indicator of these historic collisions than perceived safety, which is already being used by, you know, municipalities when they don't have access to collision data.
What does that tell you?
It tells me that this is not only easier to source than perceived safety because we don't have to ask anyone for their input. It's just a sensor that you put on the bike, and also that it's a stronger signal. And so it's sort of, you know, in science we say like that it outperforms existing alternatives.
That's interesting. You know, I wonder, you're getting ready to finish up your program. What's next for this?
Yeah, so I've been contacted by a number of nonprofits that do cycling advocacy and sort of safety, some in LA, some in Italy, some in New Zealand, and so I'm definitely interested in collaborating with some of these places and doing sort of a more multi-city deployment. I would like to actually get these manufactured, make them a bit more durable, and hopefully, you know, distribute them either through like selling them or getting sort of grant money to make them and then give them out to nonprofits to source this signal, you know, across the U.S.
Do you ever think you'd end up here when you started this idea?
Honestly, no. I really thought this was just going to be a little passion project. Most of my work at UW has been around trying to predict infectious disease, and this was sort of a passion project for me because I see cycling as an avenue for improving public health, similarly to how, like, you know, putting a stop to the flu helps public health. And I wasn't expecting it to be as sort of high visibility and successful as it is, but I'm really glad it is because it's what I like to do.
Joe Breda is a PhD student at UW's Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for meeting us out here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. And hey-o to our newest financial supporters, Hannah and Sandro. Your support means the world to us. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.